Hello, good people, and welcome to the Higher Living Podcast. And in today's episode, as you guessed, we have someone very, very interesting joining us today. Natalie Fourie has many talents. She's a neurofeedback therapist. She's got a BA Psych honors degree. She's a specialist wellness counselor. She's a neuroscience executive coach. She's a neuropsychology specialist, and she also does DNA analysis testing. So we are very blessed to have someone with that type of resume joining us on the show. Nats, welcome to the Higher Living Podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be on the show. So thank you so much.
I've been so excited to have you on the show because I think that what you do in terms of neurofeedback is something that's not really well understood by many people, you know. So I mean, I don't want to steal your thunder, but Nats, you really work with helping people take self-control of the brain by measuring their brain waves and providing feedback signals to get their brain, working more effectively. Is that sort of a decent way to summarize it?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Now that we've got the taster, before we get into the detail and under the hood of what neurofeedback and neuroscience is and your business as an entrepreneur in terms of the EQ advantage, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of who Natalie Fourie is? Where does the story of Natalie begin, and how have you managed to get to the point of being a successful business owner?
Sure. So I've always been interested in people. I think since a very young girl, I was famed in my family for being the entertainer and the connector. I'm not sure if the entertainer was always as my parents would have liked, but definitely. So I was. I think they described me as a little light bulb of energy to be around. So it was a very unique way of helping people feel connected and welcome from family and friends from a young age. So that was kind of what always got me interested in people and how the brain works and why people think the way that they do. So from a very young age, I'd say that was, a kind of something that was always on my mind. Didn't do that well in biology in school, but so we move on from there. And then, as life progressed, I first studied public relations. I thought that would be a good thing to do, and got into a bit of events management, but finally found my feet in what was then called Conservation Corporation Africa, which is now called And Beyond. And I was doing HR there for them. And it was a wonderful, I met thousands and thousands of people, both from a work perspective as well as people that came to the different lodges. Yeah, so I was intrigued to discover how people being in the bush affected their mind and affected their general psyche really quickly. So we had international tourists going to all the different lodges. And even though when I would visit, I was visiting from an HR perspective, it was interesting to see this profound effect of calming that nature and being in the wild had on people. So from there, things progressed, and I started looking a little bit more into neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience, and in my degrees, that was where the basis was, and my majors were, and also in sports psychology. And as you know, I'm an avid horse rider as well. So I have a very large base of equestrian clients, and I'm currently doing my master's in concussion, actually, in equestrian sport. So that's a little bit of where I started with the intrigue, and then I fell into neuroscience and finally into neurofeedback through lots of corporate consulting that I did. I was involved in Franklin Covey, so the late great Stephen Covey, and I worked there for many years, facilitating to people in South Africa, around South Africa, as well as in the UK. So that was a lovely opportunity. And then also did a lot of work for the Vital Smarts group, and they're also based in the States, but did a lot of corporate consulting and training specifically, so facilitation. And again, it was really interesting to see how people would take the material and use it in their own lives to influence their own thinking and ultimately their own outcomes. Or better enriched outcomes. And then got involved with much more deep science work in brain neuroscience and how the brain works and how we can activate different levels of thinking to achieve completely different outcomes, ones that we had not thought about before. So deepened my work in neuroscience and neuroscience coaching, and was very blessed to have lots of people and lots of esteemed business people as clients, which taught me a lot. And then almost 8 years ago now, I got into neurofeedback, which is where I find myself now. So I don't do any consulting or anything anymore. It's solely neurofeedback. And I'm very honored and grateful to have 2 branches in Cape Town, one in Cape Town, one in Paarl, and then here in Joburg, and then also now in Potchefstroom. So it's been a whirlwind of influencing lives through helping people, change literally the architecture and structure of their brain.
Wow. Wow, that sounds amazing. And tell me, I just want to go back to some of the earlier parts of your career. So when you were doing a lot of the coaching work, were you traveling abroad quite a lot?
Yeah, so the coaching work was done in South Africa.
Okay.
One of my clients then moved to, he first was in Chicago, so I did a little bit of work with him there and a little bit of his team, but most extensively here in South Africa. And then the work in the UK and Africa was predominantly for Franklin Covey, and that was doing the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So I facilitated that for 10 years. And it was really interesting to see that, and it still is interesting to see that people that use the 7 habits consistently to this day, which is great. So it tells us a lot about how sound the material was and how many lives it influenced.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I guess it's like when you look at those 7 habits, one almost has to sort of like ingrain that, in yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, be proactive, begin with the end in mind. Yes. And then, the really good thing is that it's as applicable today, if not more applicable than it was back in the day when it was, because it's nothing new, right?
Sure.
And if you look at, if I look at my team and I look at the clients that we work with, and just the idea of habit 3, which is, putting first things first. Yeah, absolutely. Just prioritization, right?
Yes.
And things like positive mindsets around win-win. So often or not, we find people, and this is probably going to lead into the type of work you do, but so often we find people that immediately default their thinking to the negative, to why I can't do this, or why I shouldn't do this, or this is what could happen, and not thinking about where the win could be.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's what, the work with both Franklin Covey and the Vital Smarts group is phenomenal. And really, I still use all of those tools today. And I think that's what's really important. We've always got to remember that what we've learned and what we've practiced never goes away. It's there for us to access all the time if we open to that, and we have our minds set and attuned to finding new answers with the information that we are, just running around in our head, literally, rather than looking for new things. So I think it's the balance of what we know and what we discover that as an entrepreneur makes us very, very effective. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was how do you be an entrepreneur? What's made me successful in this area? And I think it's that. I think it's a blend of knowing the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and how we connect both of those things, and very much more on the and principle of life. So rather than thinking dichotomously of either or, it's always about and, searching for more, searching for new, adventurous ways to capture people's minds and help them better their lives. So one of the things that has been my motto and my kind of credo that I live by is that I really think that I've been put on this earth to help people help themselves. And that's been my mission statement for a very long time. But I think I knew it intrinsically from a young age. And so from my consulting work in the leadership and communication space and trust space, and then ultimately influence space, I wanted a different way to affect people and a deeper way to help people. And that's when I decided to do much more work in neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience. And that's where the coaching became a lot of my main focus, I would say. And it was, great great place to be. Yeah, I've managed to take people into a much deeper level of helping them not only attain goals, but helping them see new ways and new pathways that were previously not available to them. So different ways of thinking.
Yeah, and you know what I love about the way when you talk is that you talk about the brain and you understand the brain very differently than obviously than we do. So earlier you were saying we were talking about the win-win habit,
Yes.
And you said yes, all of those prior knowledge that we had is there to be accessed, right? So you in that, I know exactly what you mean in that. You in that mean that our brain is this database, the super database, and everything that we encounter with our sense organs, which is the touch, smell, taste, etc., eyes, ears, everything, all of those information gatherers are constantly gathering information, whether good, bad, whatever it may be. It all gets stored in this database, and it is there to be accessed. That's what you meant, right?
Yes.
So what prohibits certain people from being able to access that, and why are some people more easily able to access that?
Yeah, so I think there's two basic tenets to it. One is will, and the other one is continuous learning and the ability to try, even if we fail. So a lot of people are held back by their own limitations and their own understanding, or their understanding of what they're capable of, and or risk aversion is high in most people. So there's, the one end of the spectrum, there's people that don't care about anybody else and will do whatever they can to achieve, generally achieve quite well in business, but generally have quite low EQ and are not really satisfied with their life despite their material outcomes and whatever else that they've got. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got people that, do everything for everybody else, are completely self-sacrificing and seem to please everybody else, but not really achieve any of their own goals. So that's always been the interesting play. And in fact, that was one of the main questions that Stephen Covey asked himself, and that led to the research around the 7 habits. And one of the things he was most concerned about was, how come, some students are very successful and other students weren't? And what is the difference between that? So one of the things that, in fact, they were going to call it the highly successful, 7 habits of highly successful people at some stage, I believe. And then they thought effective was a much better word, because success denotes too much about money and materialism. And that's certainly not, the message in the book. So, and obviously through the training. So I think that's the basic problem of life, that some of us seem to be overconfident in areas, others underconfident in areas. And what is my true ability, and how do I keep getting that, or how do I keep making my own light shine, seems to be, for most of us, a quest that, well, for all of us, will be ongoing. But some people seem to lose their way along that path. So neurofeedback and the work that I do now helps people clear a lot of those limitations, but in general helps brainwave functionality, and therefore removes all psychological barriers and psychological illness or ailment. So really very profound progressive therapy that's non-invasive, that moves people into not only enriched lives, but also lives that are in the absence of previous pitfalls, behaviorally, psychologically, or emotionally.
And how does it practically work for everyone out there? So the neurofeedback system, if someone was to come in for a session, what could they expect to experience?
Okay, so first we map the brain. So it's neurofeedback works on 2 principles. The first principle is the psychological principle of operant conditioning, and the second is a biological and biomechanical principle and brain principle called neuroplasticity. So this is your brain's ability to remold and change itself. In fact, neuroplasticity is how our brain changes in response to its environment. So we use electroencephalography in neurofeedback, which is a way of how we monitor and read literally what's happening in the brain and the brain waves specifically. And we know through many, many years of research what different brain waves do and how they affect the brain and how they affect functionality in different areas of the brain. For instance, if somebody has very, very high alpha, which is a very slow brain wave, in the left hemisphere of their prefrontal cortex, there's generally tendencies towards sadness as well as depression. So it's a good indicator for that. And then on the right hemisphere as well, in the prefrontal cortex, if there's a lot of beta, which is a very fast brain wave, the person is generally might worry a lot, but they may have a proclivity to anxiety or being in a state of overdrive or anxious. So the brain wave, when I map the brain and somebody comes through, to answer your original question, the first thing that we do is do a neurofeedback assessment in which I map the entire brain. So I put electrodes all over the skull, and the person watches a movie. But literally what we're doing is monitoring the speed and the pattern and the power, the amplitude, as well as the hertz of the brain waves in all different areas of the brain. So we go over every single region of the brain or portions, and then record that information. And after that, I'm able to tell them what's going on in their brain, whether their brain's running too quickly or too slowly, and the psychological and emotional and also behavioral issues, or the root cause of them, or what they may be experiencing. So it's very insightful. People usually love it because they learn about themselves and they learn about their behavior from a brain-based perspective, which is fantastic. So people often say, oh, that's why I'm feeling like this, or oh, that's why I'm. So it's really a good insight into what's going on under the hood, and understanding of where they may be in their lives.
And is there any correlation between what you notice when you observe the brain and you map the brain and you analyze the brain and the various electrodes and the feedback that you get from them? Is there any correlation to things like substance abuse and addiction? And can neurofeedback be used for those type of things?
Yes, most certainly. So whatever's happening in the person's brain, for instance, you mentioned addiction, there is usually quite a lot of beta, depending on what the person is on. So beta, again, is a very fast brain wave, and we see it in excess and very high, so very powerful hertz, literally, in different areas of the brain, and as again, depending on what they're on. But neurofeedback is used in many international rehab centers, and as an additive therapy. So, that if you go into rehab, you have many different therapies. So one is cognitive behavioral, there's art therapy, there's lots of different therapies that they use now, and neurofeedback is one. It is quite difficult to do on people that are coming off whatever they have been addicted to, especially in the initial stages, just because the person can't generally sit still for half an hour. And that's what we require in each session, not dead still, but as we go through. So once we've done the assessment, I then design a protocol for the person and a treatment protocol, and they then come back twice a week usually and have sessions in the initial phases and then taper down to only once a week. But there are in-clinic formats that we do as well, in which we do many sessions day after day, but for a set period of time. So that would be intense treatment.
And okay, I've been for a few, so I'm asking a few questions here, from the inside. So, I mean, when you go in, you get the electrodes plugged on you, and then you basically just sit there and watch a movie. But yes, you also notice that the sizing of the movie screen and the volume varies. So it gets louder, softer, bigger, smaller. And what is that process actually doing? Is that to train your brain? Is that where you like to literally?
Yes. Great question. Thank you. So it's called neuro for the brain neurons, and then feedback because you receive 3 forms of feedback. And so we use the 2 biggest sensors, or the 2 biggest sources of sensors, which is sight and sound. So there are 2 visual stimulus that the person receives. So the screen shrinks, goes bigger and smaller, and it also goes gray and white as they are watching. And then the 3rd form of feedback they receive is auditory. So we use sound. So although we set the sound, it does go up and down. So how it works is the person is plugged in. We put electrodes on the head on whatever area of the brain we're training in that day, and then they watch a movie. So the recording comes from the electroencephalograph and goes through my system and then goes back and gives them feedback in those two ways. One's auditory and the other one is visual. And as they're watching the movie, the screen goes in and out and the sound goes in and out in accordance to the speed of their brain waves. So our brains are fabulous, and they allow us to compute the movie and understand and see what's going on with the movie. But the brain itself is interested in the obscure stimulus it's getting. So TVs don't usually, when we watch a movie, it doesn't usually shrink and go small. And the sound, it is trying very hard and very quickly to stabilize this obscure or this unusual environmental stimulus it's getting. So when it gets into the right frequency and the right frequency range of whatever area we are working on. So for instance, a nice calming one would be 15 hertz. So when the brain gets into a nice calm 15 hertz ratio, the screen stays big, the sound stays stable, and the person can watch the movie as normal. So this is how the brain learns. So it learns in reward status and says, oh, that's normal. So this is how I usually watch TV, and this must be what Sean wants or whoever's on wants. So it tries to do that really quickly. It tries to make the sound stable and the screen stable within a very short space of time. And once it's got it once, so again, it only stays stable and is right, or the screen stays big and sound is stable when the brain is running in the right frequency or frequency range, depending on what area we're working on. And so when it does this once, the brain recognizes and tries to do it again and again, multiple times through the session. And that's where the training comes in. So what we're doing is we're conditioning the brain to oscillate smoothly again. So all the brain waves need to oscillate nice and smoothly in each area in order for us to optimize brain functioning in general, but we work area to area to area specifically.
Okay. And I mean, can this training be how specific can it be? So for an athlete, a specific type of athlete, can you do a specific kind of brain training to help?
Yes.
Can you?
Yes, no, absolutely. So I have many professional athletes. So I've had swimmers, which has been fantastic, and one in particular won their class or their class grade and their championship of their age, which is fantastic. So did really, really well there. I have many, many equestrian clients, cyclists, top cyclists, as well as equestrians, and equestrians in all disciplines, as well as had a tennis player and squash. And then golfers as well seems to be where our main draw card from sport is. And yeah, absolutely. So we work in different areas and different regions to improve whatever it is. So for all sports people, coordination and fine and gross motor movement is very, very important. So we do that. I had musicians as well. And I had a violinist, a very good violinist. And that was one of the things that we worked on for him a lot, was just improving. Although he is fabulous, we wanted to improve smooth coordination and speed up fine and gross motor control so that he's just better. And the same thing in sport. So we do a lot on the sensory motor rhythm strip in the brain. We do a lot on the prefrontal cortex as well as the occipital lobe. So that helps with obviously visual and visual tracking. And for balance, I've had gymnasts. Oh, yeah, gymnasts as well, I forgot, sorry. So we do, with gymnasts, we work a lot on balance, and so their coordination and balance, as well as their movement of flicking themselves up and down in all different ways with more precision. So we do, we work. To answer your question more specifically, we work on all areas of the brain all the time. But when I do the assessment, and I design the protocol, we start with the areas of deficit and most greatest need. So for a lot of my children clients, it's ADD, ADHD, anxiety, and
Really?
we can see that
Anxiety in young children.
Yeah.
Really.
So, and it's again, our response to the environment and our brain's learned response to threat. So we have a lot of huge success with ADD, ADHD. And you would have noticed being in the same building that in the afternoons the bulk of my clients are children.
Sure.
So we want to help them just get better, not only from a school point of view, but also an academic point of view. have a lot of people that come back just before writing exams. So they just come for a little tune-up before exams. And then specifically in sport, it ranges and it's different. So in some sports, we need different things. And so we work specifically to help that.
And what about things like pain management? Is it possible to do things like that?
Yes, it is. It is to a degree, absolutely. So we have, I've had people with chronic pain of various, various things and various designs. There is in pain management, as with all medical conditions, they will still need to be looked after by their physician. And so, it's in no way is a cure for an ailment, a medical ailment. We can certainly support and assist the body. But if there is brain damage, as an example, we obviously can't take that away. But the brain is a phenomenal thing. And through neuroplasticity, if an area is damaged, we work around in the surrounding area to strengthen that so that new neural connections can be made and new neural networks can be formed. And in this way, the person regains functionality. Just as, when you've had an accident and, for instance, let's say somebody loses the ability to walk from the accident, we know that through lots of hard work and OT, so occupational therapy, the brain is able to, in most cases, rewire and reconfigure areas around the damaged area to help the person perform the function again. So, and that's how neuroplasticity works. So what we are doing is speeding that process up.
Okay, that's highly interesting. Do you see any correlation with some of the aspects of depression, anxiety post-COVID? Have you seen an increase in the amount of people that need your services post-COVID?
Yes. So I have a few doctors that refer to me, and one specifically was very interested in COVID and what happened to the brain and structure of the brain. And he even coined a phrase called COVID-somnia. So he was very interested in how COVID affected people that were previously not insomniacs and afterwards became, they had lacked the ability to sleep, although remained fatigued throughout the day, highly fatigued, so grossly fatigued. And we found an area actually in the brain where alpha was too high. So it's alpha, again, is a nice relaxed brainwave. We use it for calm, centered focus, and also to get into concentration in most cases. But when it is too high, it is also the brain's resting rate and idling mode. And this was what was happening in the back of people's brains, specifically the parietal lobe and occipital lobe in most cases. And so this was increasing the difficulty or increasing the person's fatigue, but at the same time also making it more difficult for them to go to sleep. So at night. So we did very fortunate to have him being interested in this and sending through lots of people. And we just literally did assessments just to see if this pattern was there and how quickly it could be eradicated using neurofeedback. So it was very specific. We only needed a few areas of the brain. And in most cases, the patient felt relief very, very quickly. So, and this was unmedicated. So he obviously didn't want to medicate other than if they were still on COVID meds. But we had really good success with that. So just helping people feel more enlightened, less foggy-headed, better sleeping patterns. So that was great. But from the depression point of view is whatever goes on in the world, we always have people that are kind of a little bit more available to this mass hype or mass psychology or mass worry or mass. And so those people are always interesting for us to see, not only post-COVID, but now with what's going on in the world. People seem to have a mass focus of, they just feel it. They just feel what other people are going through.
Yeah. Is it also sometimes a chemical or brain chemistry issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the time if people have severe depression or anxiety, they are already medicated. And so we tell them to stay on their meds until they are feeling much, much better. And when that happens, they then go back to their physician or their psychiatrist and they lower the dose. But that is always medically done. So it's never something that we say, although neurofeedback is non-invasive, so there's no You don't feel anything, you just feel the electrodes, me putting the electrodes on your head, and there's no medication associated to it. We do, obviously I'm not a medical doctor, so we make sure that they are very well supported by their psychiatrist or their physician.
Yeah, and I think that in today's world, people are looking at alternative ways to heal, opposed to just popping a pill. I think that it's and we've all learned that popping a pill is probably the last resort in some cases. And normally one would go through the process of saying, I just don't feel myself. I'm not feeling well. I just don't feel like I'm on my game and that sort of thing. And then you would go to look at your diet and your exercise and all the basics, which is nothing wrong with. But many people don't understand that the brain and the brain's functions, can be optimized through a process like this. Yeah, you can just see if your frequencies are firing at the right rates.
Yeah. And also, so it's not only from a health perspective, we have many people that are performing well, but just want to stay at the top of their game, like executives. And there's I get a lot of sales teams and executive teams that end up sending their whole company just because they really see the difference and see the benefit of being able to heighten their function through neurofeedback. So cognitive function as well as their emotional response to their environment and their clients and each other. So really works very well from that perspective. But also and the reason why we got into DNA and DNA analysis is because we wanted to, and very often parents would bring their children through and we'd see ADD or ADHD, and they would say, oh, I'm like that. I wonder if it's hereditary. And so the answer to that is yes, there has now been a DNA component discovered that is linked to that. And so that's why we decided to do DNA. But more importantly, why we do the DNA analysis as well is we wanted to see what medication specifically you can take or will work with your body and what medication won't work with your body. And so there's a brilliant DNA test for this called MedCheck. And that's, I highly advise everybody that I see to do that, so that you know what your genotype can handle and what will work well with you, and you know what medication won't work well with you. Okay. And these are the active ingredients in medication. So, wow. And it goes with you for the rest of your life, wherever you go in the world, your genotype's not going to change. So that's really, really important, because people have a much more sensible way of medicating themselves. And when they go to their doctor, they say, so I've had my med check done. Can you just check the active ingredients on these meds? This will work with my DNA, or this won't with my DNA profile. Yeah. And so people are taking control. And there's also DNA diet.
Yeah, this is such an interesting area, because I'm fascinated about this whole area of genetic memory, because, we forget sometimes that we inherit not only our forefathers' hair and skin and eyes and nose and ears, but on a cellular level, we also inherit that DNA compound. And in the cells is this memory, and this memory holds, like I say, not only the physical stuff that we see, but it also holds some of the issues, the trauma, the memories, the depression, the anxiety, all of these things that we think are elements of what we are experiencing in this society. But there is also an element of stuff that you've brought along through your genetics.
Absolutely. And so Denalysis has and that's where the house that we use, Denalysis is phenomenal. They have wonderfully skilled and talented and exceptionally knowledgeable people on hand for you all the time to discuss things with and go through. They really are phenomenal. But they've developed one called DNA Resilience. And it's such a fantastic test to do, because it helps you understand, first of all, your proclivity to what you are resilient to, which is great. But it also tells you a whole lot of other things about yourself that perhaps, as you're saying, we don't know. We don't know our predisposition to things. So, for instance, when I did DNA Health and MedCheck, I have 3 inflammatory markers. And so that's quite high. So it's important for me to know what I can do and what I can't do. So I'm a little bit more sensitized and sensible about eating certain things or drinking certain things. I still enjoy my life as much as I can, and I strongly believe in balance in all ways.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you strongly believe in red wine.
Yeah.
That too.
Yeah, Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah, absolutely. But it gives you information so that you can move forward in life in an informed and much more informed and attuned way. And I think that's ultimately where people that do well and are successful have this yearning and desire to not only move their lives forward and the other people and those around them forward with them, but they have this ability to use creativity and take risks through creativity and influence others in a kind of stronger, finer way than other people do. So that's, and I think that's what makes all of us unique, is how we can connect to others and help people and move people forward. But there seems to be this need to learn and grow and connect with others as we do that. So using our social brain as well as our emotive brain seems to set people apart.
Tell me, what's your view on DNA engineering, genetic modification, as it's called?
I love it. I'm all for it.
Really?
All for it. If I could make little clones of me. I'm just thinking of little clones I could put in all these new offices. Would be marvelous. From an animal perspective, I have many friends that are breeders. I have people that breed horses, as well as I think they're starting to do genetic testing in animals, even domestic animals, a little bit more now, which is fantastic. So dogs and that. So I think it really opens up, specifically if you're using an animal to help you in sport. When you lose your top horse, it's quite difficult for you, first of all, from an emotional bond perspective, I imagine, but also from a performance and how much work you've put into the animal. It's quite difficult to replace that quickly. So if we can do this from a genetic level, there's just far greater chance of speeding up the whole process and getting the top performance that you need again. And in sport, as I say, particularly equestrian sport, it's very, very, breeding is very important. So I'm all for science moving forward, as long as it does it in a useful and ethical manner.
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be great for us all.
Absolutely. And I mean, Nat, I personally see how busy you are in a day. Many of us find ourselves in a situation where we are, so busy, and you're running between Potch and Paarl and Joburg, and when you're in Joburg, you're running all around the corridors. How do you balance it out? I mean, you have to somehow balance out the work and the play and find a happy equilibrium. And how do you feel that you do that in your life?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So I'm quite strict on boundaries and work-life boundaries. So I make sure that I have, as soon as I'm out of the office, then I'm out of the office. I don't speak to clients as soon as, literally, as I'm in my car, and so people know that, and it's really good to people understand it quickly. They form and get informed by your own timeline, and nobody is offended by it. So family time in the evening is my time, but I also do it through work-life balance, very specifically on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. I don't get to it every week, but I make sure that most weeks I do, and I ride my horse. So I only come in at 11 and make sure that those days I'm out and about in the sunshine, getting some good vitamin D, and also doing sport that I love and connecting with my horse, which I absolutely adore. And he's my life. So I do that a lot. So I do that for fitness. And then just general fitness, and most weekends we take the dogs for a walk or a run as well. So that also helps, and I ride on the weekend. But to answer you more specifically, I try and make sure that I have very good boundaries between work and play, and work-life balance is very, very important to me.
And the boundaries is such an important topic to touch on, because one sometimes, especially if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, one sometimes thinks that setting boundaries is a bad thing, and being available all the time for your clients is a good thing, because you're always there. But it actually, I find in my business, it works in the contrary. It works complete opposite. The minute you have boundaries in place, and the minute people know what those boundaries are, they tend to respect your time more, and they tend to respect what it is that you offer more. It's strange the way it works. So sometimes at the beginning, for aspiring entrepreneurs, don't feel like you need to be available all the time. In fact, I tell people in my team, if a client phones you and says, how's your diary looking like on a specific day? Don't say the diary is empty. It's not empty. You've got other things to do. So give them a specific slot. So, you're worth more than that. Your time is valuable.
Exactly. I can't agree with you more. And, I learned from one of my main mentors, Jay Owens. He was just the most wonderful influence in my life. And he said to me many, many years ago, he said, Nats, if you don't respect your time, nobody else will. And it just stuck with me. And although I was very young and I was probably too young to be doing the job, he had amazing faith in me. And I was working with, very senior people in leadership positions, and I was in my 20s. And would often fumble for words, and I would just look across and he would be there as a good guidance of don't panic, you've messed up severely, but I will continue. So it was always divine. And I didn't really, until it actually sunk in for me, I didn't really adhere to it. But the second I did, it was amazing that, exactly as you say, it's a set thing, so I don't answer calls at all. Well, I mean, who answers their phone nowadays anyway? But specifically, if I'm giving you my attention as my client, I don't speak to anybody else, or I'm solely and wholly invested in you in that time. And I think people feel it, and I think that's very important from an entrepreneurship point of view. And then when you finish work at 5 o'clock, you don't need to answer the phone anymore. And if you set yourself up for WhatsApping clients at 8 o'clock at night, they learn two things about you. They learn that they can push you, and they learn that you're probably weak on boundaries and discipline. And so that's, it doesn't serve you well at all. It also, ironically, breaks trust, because they don't know, if you're working with them, how many times you're dropping them for other clients, because you're consistently or continuously available for everyone. So I would say that, what's really important is to be solely and wholly engrossed and focused on whoever you're with when you are with them. So not answering WhatsApps, or not, doing anything other than being with them. And then making sure that, at the end of the day, it is the end of the day.
I think we come from a different generation where like you say, who answers their phone anymore, who even makes a phone call anymore. Everything is done via this WhatsApp messages and DMs and all of these sort of things. And I found it so funny the other day when WhatsApp was down for an hour and people were losing their shit. Right? and I guess I'm so from the old school where if I need to speak to someone, I phone, I didn't even notice that there was a WhatsApp outage. And then I just had people around me going crazy, like, oh, I can't get my WhatsApps through. And it just shows you how, as a human race, our mode of communication has changed completely.
Absolutely. And I think, although it really makes our lives easy, from my perspective, all my clients literally book them via WhatsApp. I find it easier than using Google, and then you have to go and check your calendar, and then you're going to move everything around. It was just a nightmare. So WhatsApp is very, very easy for me to use. Great communication tool. But I am highly aware of the fact that messages need to be short, sharp, to the point, and then people respond in the same way. Yeah.
And I mean now it's not even text anymore; it's voice notes most of the time.
Yes.
voice notes, GIFs, and stickers.
I love it. It's making our lives so easy.
Yeah, it is. Nats, one last question. And I mean, I always say this, but it's like literally when we get onto this podcast, I blink my eye and it's like an hour is like almost upon us. But, there's a lot of people out there that are struggling. Life has become extremely stressful from all perspectives, and our media systems don't make it any better because they just reinforce the stress.
Yes.
If you could give one piece of advice to people out there just to manage in terms or to better manage themselves during these difficult times of load shedding and water restrictions and petrol price and blah 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 blah, what would that be?
Just two quick things. I think to take time in the morning for yourself when you're in the most influential and suggestive state over self. So when we wake up, most of us have the highest degree of influence over self because two very slow brain waves and very creative, very lovely imaginative brain waves are high. So theta and alpha tend to be quite high when we wake up in the morning. So what I would strongly suggest is people take, as they wake up, they take just a moment or two to recognize that, first of all, that they're in a calm, beautiful, influential state over themselves and have most ability to, or opportunity to influence themselves in that time frame. So even if they wake up on their phone or they wake up via an alarm on their phone, do not look at their phone for at least half an hour. Turn your phone off and then wake up and look at things around you. Be mindful and be present to things around you as you wake up, feed the dogs, as I do, feed the cats, feed my husband.
Hopefully not in that order.
Yeah. So really to just take the time to settle into the day, to think about your life and think about the day and say, so, what do I really want to do today? What's the one thing that I want to do today that's going to make me feel good? That's going to make me feel proud and happy and make me feel good. And to connect to that seems to have a huge stabilizing factor throughout the day. Now, for some people that are already stressed, and can't do this, there's lots of, so people can Google this, there's lots of science around this now, but it's a thing called the physiological sigh, and it is a phenomenal tool for all of us to use. And in fact, even animals have been doing this normally and on their own for many years. And so it was discovered that this has a huge, profound effect on helping people get into states of concentration and out of states of extreme anxiety. So when your brain's really busy and you're stressed because you're thinking about 50 different things, and I tell you to calm down, as we know, that's not going to work. But one thing you can do is this thing called the physiological sigh. So I encourage people to go and Google it. There's many, and there's lots of research on it. So it's really sound practice. But essentially what it is 2 breaths in through your nose, followed by 1 long breath out through your mouth. So it sounds something like this. It goes 2 breaths in and then 1 long breath out through your mouth. And so again, it's called the physiological sigh. Lots of research around about it. So please Google it and see. But this has an amazing effect on the brain and the body. It helps you calm down really quickly. And so you can do that several times, probably 2 or 3 times with 1 ordinary breath in between, and then stop. But breathing in general has a really profound effect on us. It helps us get out of our heads, literally, out of the hard emotion, or whatever hard emotion we may be experiencing, or stress, and gets us into the body, literally.
Wow, that's fantastic. Guys, please go and look at that. In fact, you're the second person this week that's telling me about this. In your case, you've actually given it a name. I'm actually going to do some research on it myself. And in some cases, if it's really extreme, if anxiety is really extreme, I've even heard people saying that you should actually, sigh it out, like, to let it out.
Yeah, so exactly. And we've done this, all of our lives, even as infants, and dogs also do the physiological sigh. But the important part about it is it actually dumps carbon dioxide out of the system. So that seems, and it obviously relaxes the diaphragm. So please, I encourage everyone to go and read up about it, understand how you can affect your physical as well as psychological states quickly.
Okay. Natalie, our time is up. It has been an absolute blast having you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the amazing insights that you've given us. I'm sure that everyone out there has learned a lot about the brain, a lot about neurofeedback. And guys, I'll link Natalie's web details onto this podcast. So you're welcome to reach out to her should you want to come and take a hand at neurofeedback. But Nats, I wish you all the very best for your business, and may you always be this prosperous. And thank you once again for being on my show.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for your kindness and love and generosity.
Thank you, Nats. Guys, Thursday afternoon again, as always. Remember, if you do one thing, you do one thing only, and that is stay inspired.